Hey everybody, this is Perch. I released a video it was a while ago, commentary on creators leaving the US. And basically, this came from an email where somebody was asking me what I thought the viability was of creators leaving the US. And at first, I thought, but wait, when I looked at this email on the subject line, I was assuming it meant like work leaving the US, like, the practice of outsourcing writing and art to overseas, in theory, cheaper talent. I say in theory because there's a couple companies. I got called by one indie company. He's like, I'm not finding this as much cheaper. It's like, I mean, yeah, you are, you're trying to get somebody in, in, and where was it? I think Greece. I don't remember. They were trying to get somebody like that. That's not going to be cheaper there. No, like, no, oh, we're going to go off to Qatar, or we're going to, we have this artist in Bali that we're going to like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. Anyway, it was about, in this case, Mags Visaggio's plan to kind of lead a group of creators who are fearful of the current U.S. administration out of the U.S. And basically, I made the point of like that's not a real plan. It's not a smart plan. It is expensive to leave the country, and the places that are more expensive, or sorry, the places that are less expensive, like significantly so less expensive than you would actually be worth the cost and the disruption and everything else to move there. Probably not the places you want to be. Probably even less so if you are not the race of the country you're moving into, and probably not if you are anything but straight. A lot of the but just very bluntly, a lot of the countries where you'd find cheaper living are not very accommodating, let's say, over, whatever country, race plus straight plus man. I think you're gonna have a tougher time. So anyway, I know, but Trump, but well, it's I'm just whatever. It's tough. But if it wasn't a serious plan. But there are some comments on the video, and one of them I liked, or at least I thought summarized really well, kind of something that is worth talking about. And this is probably going to be one of those things where it sounds like a burn. Don't mean it to be a burn, but here we are. It says, let's see, where is this comment? Well, you know what? I actually now I can't find it. How about that? Oh no, here it is. Thanks to Comics YouTube, I spend much more time thinking about mags than I ever want to, which is zero. Which is weird for someone who currently has little actual involvement in the comic industry. All right. And then there's a follow-up that was equally good. Yeah, if you don't give much attention to the comic dirt sheets and culture warriors online, comics honestly aren't any more political than any other form of media. Okay, we'll unpack that last bit in a second, but I generally agree. But I think it brings up what I want to talk about here, which again is going to sound probably much harsher than I mean it to, because I'm trying to be nice. And generally, when people try and be nice, it actually comes out harder. It hits harder. And it's basically this. A lot of the names you hear are as close to irrelevant to comics as it gets. When I say irrelevant, I don't mean for their own ambitions. They may love comics. They may be passionate about comics. They may be making comics. But to the things that actually matter in this industry, they have no importance. So people like, it's actually a who's who of the people you hear on YouTube on a regular basis. Mags, Vita, Alex DeCampi, Tess Fowler, Joe Glass. Where is Joe Glass, by the way? I have not. I have heard nothing from Joe Glass, minus YouTubers talking about Joe Glass in the last year. A lot of these people are irrelevant to the comic business. And when I say comic business, I guess I should define it. It's basically anything that makes actual money, anything that actually keeps a retailer's lights on. I'll put it kind of a different way, maybe a meaner way. Don't mean to. George Perez, rest in peace. George Perez has far more current 2025 impact to comic shops than, say, Alex DeCamby. And it's not close. There, one, a lot of money was made off of George Perez. Two, a lot of money is still made off of George Perez in his back material. Three, people will still come to a comic shop to celebrate or see something that George Perez does. There's a comic shop in Dallas who got a piece of original art from George Perez and won it in an auction, or I don't know. And they were doing a contest on, buy a bunch of comic books and then you could win this piece of art. It was super cool. It's a cool contest. It is actually driving some business into that comic shop. It is driving more business than any of the other names I mentioned in this video. Even more like Brian Michael Bendis is in 2025, fall of 2025, is irrelevant to current comic business. He aged up John Kent. Yeah, and that I think, as I've said, I think that did leave a lot of money off the table. I think that was probably a business mistake. I think you gave up on a lot of interesting stories, you can tell, because you're rushing to get it done. So that decision still haunts us, but Bendis is not relevant in 2025 comics. Now, maybe in 2026, he gets hired by Marvel, he starts writing Iron Man again, or who knows, But today, irrelevant. This one will get some debate. Tom Taylor, not as relevant as YouTubers would have you believe. His name comes up. He is still active doing comics, but whether Tom Taylor whiffs it on an issue or not, is, based on the comics he's currently writing, he is not. It doesn't matter. And so let me explain that just a little bit more. The comic industry, meaning what retailers sell, what keeps the lights on, what pays for rent, is a fraction of the total comics produced. There can be 500 to 600 comics produced in a month. The comics that matter to that revenue are about 10% of that. In other words, if I'm doing that math, 60. That's even too generous. We're really talking about 30 comics that matter. And you think of it this way. If Batman stops selling, right? Matt Fraction is on this Batman comic. If Batman tanks in the sales, that's really bad. If the Harley Quinn Fart Spectacular tanks in the sales, nobody gives a shit. It doesn't matter. Because the comic shops are not ordering big on that comic, where they do count on Batman keep the lights on. X-Men actually matters if it sells or not. If it doesn't sell, it's trouble, and it creates a hole the comic industry then has to dig out of. X-Men, Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Avengers to some extent, Batman. These comics all have significance. Sometimes, it's not always those guys, by the way. One of the things that comic shops will tell you is that Saga came out, and Saga started making a lot of sales, and Saga actually started to be something that comic shops would sell a ton of, and therefore became something that the comic shops depended on for revenue because it paid the rent. That was the power of Saga. And then when Saga went on a hiatus, seemingly forever, and the bottom dropped out of it, and so did all the interest and the attention, Saga stopped being a title that anyone cared about, but the retailers basically had to find something else to make up the gap. Before you could count on Saga for bringing in a chunk of your money in the month. When Saga decided to stop coming out on a regular basis, it stopped being a comic that people could count on. And that's how the comic industry works. Not all comics are equal. But, and this is, the kind of the damning thing to comic YouTubers, is that a lot of time gets spent on talking about people who are not relevant. Now, I'm sure, if you're Mags or you're Alex or you're, Joe Glass, whatever, that's a mean thing to say. You want to be relevant. Who doesn't want to be relevant? And I don't say this out of hatred, but I do say it out of truth. If Joe Glass releases a comic this month, it really isn't going to matter to retailers or to sales or to kind of anything that keeps the business clicking along. It is as almost as irrelevant as can be. If Scott Snyder, okay, by contrast, if Scott Snyder doesn't put out a comic, um, you know, it actually has an impact right now. It feels like I'm really kissing Scott's ass at the moment, and so I hate to do that, but it is true. He is a name that matters. If Greg Capullo puts out a Marvel comic right now, it matters. If Sean Murphy puts out a White Knight comic, it will matter. It means marginal sales, not marginal meaning small, but it means additive sales to a comic shop. If Vita puts out a comic, people may complain about it, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if that comic comes out or not. It doesn't matter to the retailer. The retailer may sell a couple. The retailer may have, people who show up and buy it, but at no point does a Vita comic pay for rent. Period. And no matter what region you're in. So we do have a situation where the comic creators that get talked about the most, like the dumb Mags wants to move out of the country. I mean, move out. I mean, I dare you, move out. It doesn't matter whether you move out or doesn't move out. It doesn't mean anything. That's the shame of kind of where, these threats, these threats are idle threats. Oh no, you're going. Okay. What will that mean for comics? Oh my God, who's going to do the signing now? Like, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. So why then why do YouTubers make videos about Mags if Mags is irrelevant? Well, two reasons. Two reasons that kind of leads to your answer. Reason number one, Mags is trans. Sorry, not sorry. That's why. Reason number two, Mags has a big mouth, and and seems to have trouble controlling the comments that come out of that mouth. So, as a result, there's lots of material to work with. I think if and I have no idea. I think Mags loves every bit of attention that Mags gets, but if Mags ever wanted people to stop making comments, one way to do it would be to stop saying crazy things. When you say crazy things, people show up and they comment on it. And people need to sell YouTube clicks for ads. And what are you going to sell? Like, you ever notice how there's not many videos about Jed McKay? Have you noticed that? Like, Jed McKay rarely gets talked about. For better or for worse, by the way. Even when Jed McKay was putting out a Moon Knight book that everybody was really excited about and said was good, still, very rarely did people talk about Jed McKay. The problem is Jed McKay doesn't have this like feed full of crazy stuff. Jed McKay, and I mean this with love, Jed, is boring in terms of kind of drama. Like if Jed McKay started posting, Israel is the source of all. Who knows? Whatever. You're gonna go down that path. If he started doing that, amazingly, it would be shocking. Suddenly, we'd start seeing videos about Jed McKay. It's not going to be his books. I feel already people are like, I complimented a Jed McKay book the other day. I'm sure you did, and I'm glad for it. My point is, there is an oversized amount of commentary on people who are absolutely irrelevant to comics. And what's funny about that is, people like to clown on, people like Mags, and Mags makes it easy to clown on, but same thing with Vita, or, Vita makes it easy to make fun of Vita. Okay. So does Nadia, and so does, the whole host of others. They make it easy to make fun of. And a lot of the people making fun of these people are like, what are these people doing in comics? Well, they're not in comics in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, you could make the argument of like, yeah, but if you gave a different writer, whatever, the Daughter of Blade comic, maybe it would sell. No, it wouldn't. Nobody's buying the Daughter of Blade comic. Doesn't matter who you put on it. Like literally, you could put on, you could do Daughter of Blade, Absolute. Yes. That wouldn't even work, obviously, but yeah, this is Marvel DC swaps. We'll send it over there. Scott Snyder writes Absolute Blade's daughter, Brielle. It's not selling. Nobody cares. So the perspective here is, yeah, it's fine. I mean, look, people can make fun of whatever they want to make fun of. They can. I'm not policing. By no circumstances am I suggesting you can't do a video, you can't talk about a topic just because they're not popular. But I am suggesting at least you take one different look at it, and the different look at it would be this. People ask all the time, like, why do comic companies give people like, uh, hell, this writer of the Red Hood? Why do people give, people like that comics? Well, the answer is they don't really. Yeah, no, I know they gave him a comic. I know that there's something being produced by DC, but nobody gives a shit about it. Even before this controversy, nobody gave a shit about it. Like, I get you. Fire and Ice sucks as a comic. It absolutely does. Nobody cares. It is the equivalent of if a tree falls in the wood with anyone, it doesn't make a sound. It doesn't make a sound. It's being printed. It's using up tree material, ironically enough, but it doesn't matter. Again, I'm not saying you can't complain about it. I'm not saying, nothing to talk about, but I am saying if your goal here was, these people shouldn't be in the comic industry, well, they're kind of not. If you produce a comic nobody talks about, nobody reads, nobody cares about, and sells, 5,000 copies. I mean, I think the Campy and Tess Fowler would desperately love to have a comic that would sell 5,000 copies. Then do they matter? I mean, bluntly, thanks for listening.
My friends say I'm weird because I've never been to Olive Garden.
Olive Garden sucks.
It does.